Have you ever been in a conversation with someone and you realize they're not really paying attention to what you're saying? There's nothing worse than this. And in this video, I'm going to give you 5 ways to show your active listening skills so that the other person you're talking to feels like you're fully engaged in the conversation. First tip is to give your full attention to the person you're listening to. This seems very straightforward, but there are so many distractions that happen in our everyday lives, and one of the big ones is our phone. Many people are tempted to check their phone if it buzzes or periodically to see if they have any new messages. And when you do that, you're basically telling the person you're listening to that they are not as important as whatever information is on your device. And that's not a good feeling for the other person. Sometimes we find we're at networking events and there's a lot of background noises or other conversations we can hear on the side. And it's really difficult to pay full attention to the person we're listening to, but do your best to really focus on what that person is saying. Block out those other noises and other distractions that you hear. Another way people tend to not give their full attention is with their eyes. I've been at many events where I'm speaking to someone, and as they're listening to me, you can tell they're looking past, almost as if, hey, Wade, you're not the most important person in this room. I'm trying to see the next person I want to speak to after we're done this conversation. And again, that's not a good feeling. So make that eye contact. And that leads me into my next tip, which is utilize nonverbal cues. I just mentioned eye contact. Rather than having your eyes wander, you should be making eye contact with the person you're speaking with, and you should use other nonverbal cues as well. Try to have a smile on your face so you're encouraging. Obviously, it needs to match what they're talking about. If they're talking about something serious, you don't want to be overly smiley, but add in things like subtle head nods when they're mentioning something that's important. Or if they say something surprising, you should have a look on your face that resembles, yeah, that is a surprising piece of information, whether that's an eyebrow raise. These are common sense pieces, but these will show the person who's speaking to you that you are truly engaged in what they are saying. The next tip is probably the most important thing, and the best way to show you are an active listener is asking questions. When we're in conversations, it's very tempting for our mind to be racing, thinking about the next thing we're going to say to contribute to the conversation. But the problem with that, while we're thinking of our own stories, is we're not paying full attention to the person who's speaking to us. If we reframe that, and instead of thinking about what we're going to say next, we truly get interested about what the person is saying to us and have the task of asking questions or have that as a priority, it will completely reshape the conversations we're having. There's research to back this up. Back in 2017, there was a Harvard research study which found that people who ask questions in conversations are more liked by their conversation partners than people who do not, because we're showing a genuine interest. By listening carefully and thinking up more questions and seeking to get more information from this person, that person will feel validated, like whatever they're talking about is important because we care enough to ask more questions about it. This is my number one tip when it comes to the best way to show your active listening skills, and that is asking questions. The next way you can work on active listening skills is to avoid interrupting the person who we're speaking with. If somebody is telling a big story and we want to jump in, but they're building momentum in their conversation and they're excited, if we jump in and interrupt that, there's a good chance that will stifle their excitement about the story. And not always. There's situations where people feed off of each other, jumping in, wanting to know more information, but beware of constantly interrupting people because there are those people who are simply more passive when it comes to their communication style. And if they hear somebody else speak, they will just stop their story right there and allow the other person to take over. But it's not a great feeling for that person if they're not able to get a word in edgewise. So ensure that you are allowing those people to tell their full stories. It's great to have questions. It's great to have stories of our own to contribute to the conversation, but avoid interrupting or interjecting when somebody is in the middle of whatever they are talking about. My final tip on how to have great active listening skills comes from a friend of mine who happens to be a hairdresser, and she is one of the best conversationalists. She always remembers things. If you think about it, spends her whole day working with clients, hearing their stories, and she has to be a good listener. She has to practice those active listening skills because that is the majority of her job, is having conversations throughout the day. And what I noticed about her was time and time again when I was having conversations, she would always remember key things I had told her in the past. And at one point I asked her how she's so good at this, or how her memory is always on point, that she remembers these things. And she explained to me that she's purposeful about it. After she meets with a client or a friend, she has notes in her phone which she keeps on different people that she's interacted with. Now, certain professions know this very well. For example, many real estate agents have something called a CRM, which is a client relationship management tool, and that is to keep notes and information on the clients so that they don't forget key things. And I think that all of us should approach that with our social relationships, of truly listening carefully and then making note of certain things. If there's an acquaintance who you're starting to get to know a little bit better and they mention they have 2 kids and what their kids are interested in, make a note of that, because the next time you see that person, that is a great reminder to ask them about how their kids are, because their kids are probably their world and it will be meaningful to them that you've asked about that. And on the flip side, it's good to do a little bit of research prior to meeting up with somebody. So if you're going for lunch with somebody who you haven't seen in the last year, that's the great thing about social media. You can pull up their social media, their Instagram, their Facebook, and you can learn a couple of things that they've been up to in the last year. That way, when you're meeting with that person, you can ask questions about things you've seen on their timeline of life that they voluntarily put out there. And that will be meaningful, but also you'll be more engaged because you'll already have a bit of base information about whatever that person has shared. So you're already a little bit invested in the story, and it will be easier to use some of the other skills that we talked about earlier, like asking questions and not getting distracted. I hope these 5 active listening skills were beneficial to you. If they were, let me know. Make a comment down below in this video. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already done that. And thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I will catch you on the next one.